Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something pretty unusual.
Definitely unusual.
We're looking at the Large Inflatable Flea Company, founded way back, get this, 1839, nearly 2 centuries.
It's kind of mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah.
A company dedicated just to giant inflatable fleas for that long.
Right. It sounds like, I don't know, a joke or a novelty thing, but the story behind it is actually surprisingly complex, lots of twists.
Oh, absolutely. You think inflatable fleas, you think maybe party decoration, but no, there's innovation. There's, believe it or not, military applications, regulatory drama.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite the saga.
And it all starts with one guy, Friedrich R. Poppins. Great name.
Fantastic name.
He called himself the first inflatable flea specialist, or IFS, which is, well, a title you invent yourself, I guess.
You sort of have to, don't you, for that particular field?
But what's interesting is his vision. He saw fleas not just as, pests. He saw something more.
Exactly. That initial spark to look at this tiny, annoying bug and think, bigger, much bigger, and potentially inflatable.
Where does that even come from? The sources hint at something, don't they? Something about the Civil War.
Yeah, it's a bit vague, but there's this suggestion, this rumor almost, that Poppins might have, befriended a flea during the American Civil War.
Befriended a flea during the Civil War.
I know. It sounds completely out there. But that's one of the stories floating around about his inspiration. Adds a layer of weird charm, doesn't it?
It really does. You can't make this stuff up. So from this, maybe flea friendship, the company starts. How did they even get popular initially?
Well, think about the time. Mid-1800s. They tapped into that Victorian fascination with novelty and science, sort of. They became hits at traveling flea circuses.
Giant inflatable fleas in flea circuses. The irony.
Right, in scientific exhibitions, novelty attractions. People hadn't really seen anything like a, say, football-sized inflatable flea before. It was genuinely fascinating back then.
So it captured the public imagination, laid the groundwork.
Exactly. Established them in this very, very specific market. Okay, let's dig into those early years, because it wasn't easy. Poppins faced some serious technical problems.
Yeah, making a giant inflatable flea that actually, worked consistently back then must have been tough.
Oh, for sure. The materials, the basic engineering,
yeah.
It was all pretty primitive. The sources actually list these wonderfully named issues they had, like inflatable flea collapse, IFC.
Hey, sounds official. What was that?
Basically, the early rubber just wasn't strong enough, or the valves leaked, or they just put too much air in. Top. Or, more likely, just PFFT, a sudden deflation. Not great for showmanship.
Yeah, real letdown, literally. So Poppins had to figure that out.
He did. He started developing these, early pressure regulation systems, trying to control the inflation, stop them from collapsing or bursting. It forced him to get inventive with pneumatics right from the start.
Necessity and invention, even for fleas. What else went wrong?
Well, then there was flea material meltdown.
FMM.
Meltdown, like literally melting. Pretty much. Early rubber compounds didn't handle heat or sunlight well at all. They'd get brittle, crack, basically degrade. Imagine one of these things in an outdoor parade on a sunny day.
Oh, dear. A puddle of flea.
Exactly. Apparently it happened. Bad PR, So that pushed him to develop protective coatings, experiment with different rubber mixes to make them last longer.
Smart. Constant problem solving.
Okay, what's next on the list of flea calamities?
Let's see. Flea fungus, nicknamed Fungus Bunkus.
Flea fungus.
On rubber.
Apparently. If they were stored in damp conditions, mold and mildew could grow on the surface. Made them sticky, unpleasant. Just not good.
Ew, how did he fix that?
Get this vinegar and baking soda. Basic household stuff. Plus just better storage methods, keeping them dry. It was a sort of practical, low-tech solution for a weirdly specific biological problem.
Vinegar and baking soda for giant flea hygiene? Amazing. Surely that's all the problems.
Not quite. There was also bloat and overinflation disorder.
BO.
BO.
Like body odor.
I don't know. More like just bloating. Again, linked to the early unreliable pressure regulation. They didn't have precise controls, so sometimes the fleas would just inflate too much, get dangerously unstable.
Like cartoon characters about to explode.
Kind of, yeah. Sometimes they did burst.
Yeah.
So Poppins had to introduce things like pressure relief valves, figure out more exact inflation methods. Safety, even comical safety, was a concern.
Exploding fleas.
Right.
Not ideal for business. Okay, keep going.
Then we had puncture wounds, also called, quite ironically, flea bite syndrome.
The flea biting itself, how?
So early models apparently had like internal mechanical bits to make them seem more lifelike, maybe wiggle a leg or something. But these parts could actually puncture the inflatable skin from the inside.
Oh, the irony. Undone by its own mechanism.
Precisely. So the Prix was more sophisticated design, reinforcing the outer layer, using separate internal bladders, basically giving the flea tougher skin.
An internal defense system. Okay, is that the last one? Please tell me that's the last one.
Almost. Last major one was flea fatigue syndrome, FFS.
FFS. Seriously? What was that?
After being inflated and deflated many times, the rubber would just lose its elasticity. They wouldn't bounce right. They'd look
Yeah.
tired, worn out.
Or like the fleas themselves were just exhausted from existing.
Pretty much. So Poppins developed an internal system to stabilize the air pressure better, maintain that bounce, and he even suggested rotating the fleas, like giving them rest periods, managing a whole flea fleet.
A fleet of inflatable fleas needing rest days. Okay, my mind is officially blown.
So yeah, all these weird specific problems. But by the early 20th century, through all this trial and error, they'd actually figured a lot out.
The fleas got better,
Really?
more robust.
Much better, more durable, more lifelike details. The company had really cemented its reputation. They were the world leaders in giant inflatable fleas. They'd survived all these bizarre engineering issues.
A global leader in inflatable fleas. It still sounds funny, but clearly they were serious about it.
Very serious. But the story gets even stranger as we move into the 20th century. Because these fleas, they went to war.
Went to war. Inflatable fleas.
Well, in some very unusual ways. Our sources mention two specific conflicts. The Second Boer War and later the Suez Crisis.
Okay, let's start with the Boer War. That's what, turn of the century, 1899 to 1902?
Exactly. And the British military apparently had this experimental idea. Using inflatable fleas for psychological warfare.
PsyOps with inflatable fleas. What was the thinking there?
The idea, as far as we can tell, was pretty basic. Confusion and fear. They'd sneak these football-sized fleas near Boer encampments at night. The hope was the sudden weird appearance of giant bugs would just unsettle the enemy troops.
Just freak them out with giant fleas in the dark.
Pretty much. And get this, some reports mention they even used luminescent dyes on them.
Glowing fleas.
Yeah. Imagine being a soldier out there, maybe superstitious, and seeing giant glowing insects appearing out of nowhere. It apparently led to rumors of supernatural creatures.
I can believe it. Did it work?
Not really. It seems it was mostly dismissed as a military oddity. More confusing than terrifying, perhaps.
Yeah.
Didn't really have a strategic impact. But it shows they were willing to try. Well, anything.
Definitely outside the box thinking. Okay, fast forward to 1956, Suez Crisis, Cold War era, fleas again.
Fleas again. This time, British PSYOPs units ordered a whole load of them, 1,500 inflatable fleas.
1,500. What was the plan this time?
Similar thinking, different context. The idea was to potentially airdrop them over Egyptian positions. They thought maybe they could exploit local superstitions about, unnatural creatures or maybe hints of biological warfare, create panic.
An airdrop of giant rubber fleas. That's ambitious.
Ambitious, yes. Practical, not so much. They ran into major logistical problems.
Like what?
Well, for one, the desert heat. Just like Poppins' early problems. The heat caused many of the fleas to overinflate and just pop before they even got dropped or soon after.
Popping fleas raining from the sky. Or not quite making it.
Right. And the ones that did survive inflation often got caught by the desert winds and just blown way off course, tumbling across the landscape.
So instead of terror, it was more like bizarre bouncing litter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The sources suggest the Egyptian forces were reportedly more amused than scared by the whole thing. So yeah, that tactic got abandoned pretty quickly too. Another military dead end for the inflatable flea.
Amazing. So their military career was short-lived and mostly ineffective.
And pretty comical, let's be honest, but it's part of their weird history.
Definitely adds to the legend. Okay, so after attempted warfare, what other curveballs did the company face? You mentioned regulatory issues.
Yes. Fast forward again, this time to the early 2000s. A very modern problem hits this old company. U.S. regulators tried to ban their inflatable fleas.
Ban them? Why? Safety hazard? Choking hazard for giants?
No, it's something much stranger. They found trace amounts of flaca in the paint.
Flaca, the synthetic stimulant. In flea paint, how on earth?
Believe it or not, it was apparently an unintentional byproduct of a really old, 19th century manufacturing process they were still using for some specific pigments or something.
Wow. A zombie chemical from the past lurking in their flea paint.
Sort of, yeah. The company obviously was like, hold on, the levels are minuscule. There's absolutely no health risk. I mean, it wasn't like people were trying to extract it or ingest the paint.
You'd hope not. But regulators probably didn't care about the dose.
Well, it caused a stir, but the company acted fast. They reformulated the paint, got rid of the Flocka issue, made sure it met all modern standards, but apparently managed to keep the look and quality the same.
And did they avoid the ban?
They did. The sources mentioned some savvy legal maneuvering, so they managed to fight it off and keep selling in the U.S.
Good for them, I guess. And reassuring for flea enthusiasts today.
Absolutely. Current products are totally compliant, 100% Flocka-free, safe flea inflation for everyone.
Okay, that's one crisis averted. But the story keeps getting weirder, doesn't it? There's mention of Mexico.
Right. This is a more recent and much murkier part of the story. The company apparently has, quote, strong ties with Mexico.
What kind of ties?
Financial ones. They've supposedly received pretty generous funding from some anonymous organizations based in Mexico.
Anonymous organizations funding an inflatable flea company. Why?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The sources don't say. In return for the funding, the company apparently supplies these groups with inflatable fleas at a discount.
Discounted fleas for mystery benefactors. What are they doing with them?
Nobody seems to know, or at least the sources we have don't disclose it. It's presented as this kind of enigmatic arrangement. Very intriguing, very suspicious sounding, maybe.
Definitely sparks the imagination. Could be anything from bizarre art installations to, well, who knows?
Exactly. Lots of room for speculation. But what is clear is that this funding, whatever its purpose, has apparently been really important for the company's recent survival and continued innovation.
So, a mysterious financial lifeline for Mexico keeps the inflatable fleas bouncing. Adds another layer of modern intrigue to this already packed history.
It really does. Just when you think you've heard it all. Anonymous Mexican flea funding.
Okay, but we've saved the most intense story for last, I think. Something that happened back in the 90s.
Oh, yes. The 1993 Little Rock Inflatable Flea Factory shootout.
Just the name tells you it's going to be bizarre.
Bizarre doesn't even begin to cover it. This was a full-blown 12-hour armed standoff. A lone gunman, local police, SWAT, even the National Guard, all converging on an inflatable flea factory.
12 hours. What were the casualties?
It was bad. 7 wounded, 14 people killed, 2 listed as missing in action, and millions in damage to the factory itself. A truly horrific event, wrapped in absurdity.
14 killed. That's staggering. Who's the gunman? An employee?
A former employee, Randy Bigsby. He'd been their lead inflatable flea inspector for 17 years.
17 years inspecting inflatable fleas.
Yep. But he'd been fired the year before, in 1992, apparently due to increasingly erratic behavior.
What kind of erratic behavior connected to the fleas?
It seems so.
Uh-huh.
He developed these really paranoid conspiracy theories. He was convinced the company was involved in shady deals using Mexican drug money, maybe linked to those anonymous donors we just talked about.
Okay, so he was obsessed with that.
That, and he was paranoid about government plots to regulate flea inflation technology. Just really lost touch with reality.
Any idea why?
Well, the sources mentioned he spent a lot of time in the paint mixing department towards the end of his employment. There's speculation that maybe, just maybe, long-term exposure to the chemical fumes there could have contributed to his mental decline. A really tragic possibility.
That adds a grim layer. So he gets fired, then what?
He disappeared for several months. Then, on April 27, 1993, he came back, armed to the teeth, apparently intending to take his job back by force.
Take his job back? With guns?
Yeah. He stormed the factory early in the morning, around 6:42 a.m. He was heavily armed. And get this, he was wearing a modified company uniform, but with parts of rubber fleas fashioned into some kind of makeshift body armor.
Flea armor.
Flea armor. It just shows how deep his obsession went. He fired warning shots, then shot a security guard, Eric Byrne, who sadly died later. Then he barricaded himself inside the paint mixing department.
The place he knew best.
Yeah.
And probably the most hazardous.
Exactly. Little Rock PD arrived around 7:15 a.m. Bigsby immediately opened fire on them, wounding one officer, Dennis McCall, and killing another officer, Peter Robinson.
This escalated incredibly fast.
Extremely fast. SWAT was deployed, but the factory itself was a nightmare for them. Imagine trying to clear rooms filled with giant, slippery rubber molds, half-inflated fleas acting as obstacles. It was chaotic.
I can't even picture it. Like a surreal obstacle course during a firefight.
Pretty much. The situation got so bad they requested federal assistance. The National Guard arrived by 10:00 a.m.
The National Guard for an inflatable flea factory siege.
Yeah. And several things made the standoff drag on. The maze-like layout, the sheer volume of inflatable fleas providing cover for Bigsby, the chemical hazards in the paint room.
And didn't he have some kind of weird weapon, too?
He did. He'd apparently rigged an industrial air pump to fire screws and nails, which he had reportedly coated in fecal matter.
Oh, that's beyond words. Just vile.
Truly disturbing. He refused all attempts at negotiation. His demands were totally delusional. Get his job back, make the plant manager resign publicly, launch an investigation into the Mexican benefactors.
He was completely gone. Did he plan this for long?
It seems so. They later found he'd stockpiled supplies inside the factory food rations, a huge amount of ammunition, company documents he'd scribbled notes all over in red ink, and bizarrely, 38 boxes of Twinkies.
Twinkies? For a siege?
38 boxes. Suggests he'd been planning this for months, living in his own paranoid world.
Okay, so how did it end? 12 hours is a long time.
The turning point came around 3:30 p.m. They tried to flush him out using flashbangs and rubber rounds. But this had an unbelievable, unforeseen consequence.
What happened?
The explosions hit a storage room packed with partially inflated fleas. This caused a chain reaction. Fleas started bursting, inflating wildly, blocking corridors, creating this shifting, bouncing landscape of cover that Bigsby actually used to move around.
The fleas became mobile cover? You are kidding me.
Not kidding. And it got worse. The explosions damaged some of the main industrial air pumps. This led to overpressurization in other parts of the factory, causing more fleas to explode violently, sending rubber shrapnel everywhere.
It sounds like absolute pandemonium, a rubber nightmare.
There's a quote from a National Guard officer on the scene that sums it up perfectly. He called it a war zone covered in giant bouncing bugs.
I have no words for that. A war zone covered in giant bouncing bugs.
Sums it up, doesn't it? The final act came around 6:30 p.m. They finally brought in an armored personnel carrier, an APC, to breach the factory wall.
They needed an APC to get through the fleas and the chaos.
Apparently so. As they breached, Bigsby made a break for it. In a final, desperate, surreal moment, he tried to escape by riding a partially inflated flea out through a loading dock.
Riding an inflatable flea, like a rubber steed.
That's the image, yes. But it didn't last long. A National Guard sniper took a shot, hit him, and he was captured immediately by the troops moving in.
Wow. Just wow. What an end.
An absolutely insane end to an insane day.
What was the fallout, besides the tragic loss of life?
Huge damage, as I said. $3.2 million worth. The factory had to close for 6 months for repairs and cleanup.
And the company's response?
Well, this is where it gets controversial maybe. After reopening, they actually released a limited edition product, the battle-damaged inflatable flea, as a collector's item.
They monetized the shootout with damaged fleas.
They did. Profoundly weird decision, maybe deeply inappropriate, but apparently it was successful as a collector's piece. Speaks volumes about something, I don't know what.
It's just unbelievable. And Bigsby.
Sentenced to life in prison, no chance of parole. And reportedly, even today, he still insists the whole flea conspiracy involving Mexican money is real.
What a dark, bizarre, and ultimately tragic chapter in the company's history. It's almost hard to believe it actually happened.
It really is. A truly legendary, if deeply disturbing, event.
So, wrapping this up, what a journey. The large inflatable flea company, nearly 200 years, starting with Frederick Poppins and his possibly flea-inspired vision.
Through all those bizarre technical hurdles, ISC, FMM, fungus bunkus.
Their strange detours into psychological warfare.
The Flocka paint scare, the mysterious Mexican funding.
And culminating in the absolutely surreal 1993 Little Rock shootout.
It's an incredible story of persistence, weird innovation, and just unbelievable events surrounding something as mundane on the surface as an inflatable flea.
Key takeaways. I mean, the founder's singular vision is one. The sheer ingenuity needed to overcome those unique problems. And, well, you can't forget the shootout.
Definitely unforgettable. It really shows how even the most niche, seemingly whimsical businesses can have these incredibly complex, sometimes dark, and utterly surprising histories.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If inflatable fleas have this kind of story, what other seemingly absurd inventions out there have histories just as wild, just waiting to be uncovered?
It's a great thought to end on. Maybe there are hidden sagas behind rubber chickens or whoopee cushions or, well, anything really. The world's probably full of these unexpected deep dives.